Hello, dear participants. We are happy to welcome you at our sixth event that is being implemented by SADO think tank in cooperation with Unite Europe. It's the sixth event dedicated to the public participation and engagement in the communities, engagement to the processes of rebuild and reconstruction, but we speak about very broad topic actually here. I'm happy to see you. My name is Maria Grishenko, and I'm going to be the moderator of today's meeting. Let us talk about the rules of communication, first of all. If you want to say something, you have an option to raise your hand. If you want to ask a question or to comment on something, I also encourage you to use chat. Also, I'm very grateful for you for being with us here today. We're gonna talk about engagement in communities, engagement in cooperation with sensitive topics, and we will try to exchange experience of different projects, experience of cooperation with different communities on important but difficult topics. First of all, we're gonna talk with Inna Tereshenko about the project, dialogue project and conflict solving in communities, including communication and interaction with IDPs. I'm sorry, I guess I'm having bad connection. Can you hear me? Yes, we can hear you. It's okay. Okay, after we talk to Inna, we will discuss the topic of engagement of community in the very important discussion. I see that Maria does have connection problems. We can't hear or see her anymore. Now we will try to solve this problem. But while we are waiting for Maria, I can tell you more about our today's event. The second topic for today is the topic of social and educational infrastructure. We know that in the decentralization process, we often talk about the change of social infrastructure network, and it's a sensitive topic, and we will discuss the experience of work with this topic. Also, we will talk about environment, climate change, and how we can work with this in the communities when we face this kind of the problems. And at the very end, we will talk about the engagement of Roma communities. This topic is also very important, but sometimes difficult for certain communities. That's why we feel it is important to bring it up today. So this is our plan for today. My name is Ivan Terletsky. I am the director of SADAS. Usually Maria gives me a floor to greet you, and this is what I'm currently doing. As Maria mentioned, this is our sixth event, and our project is dedicated to the engagement of the citizens of communities to the rebuild process within the framework of the project that we are happy to implement with our partners Unite Europe. We have different types of work within this project. One of the activities is the series of 6 workshops. And this is the 6th workshop, actually, and we were trying to discuss different issues of engagement. First, we were talking about raising awareness, informing local authorities, research as a tool, also about memory, and other important things, such as engagement of business and other key stakeholders to the development, their engagement to the development of the communities. And today is the last event, and we would like to pay more attention to important social aspects of engagement, because social issues, inequality, access to the resources, those are all very important questions. And when we talk about participation and engagement of citizens to the decision making, it is very important to understand the social context we are in. In order to be able to participate in different discussions, you need resources such free time, such as ability to deal with certain questions. This is an entry point. And sometimes some social groups have naturally more access to engagement, to participating in their community development, because people, for example, most of the time they're at work, they take care of children, other family members who need their care. So it's very important when we plan engagement to make sure that we engage everyone, not only people who can allow themselves to be engaged, who don't have people dependent on them, who don't work full day, etc., or who work full day, etc. So it's very important to understand the social context and to make sure whether all the social groups are actually engaged, all the social groups represented in the community. That's why we're having this event. That's one of the key risks in engagement process, and you have to pay special attention to it. It's also important to deal with important questions in engagement process. A couple of years ago, we did a research on engagement practices, and one of unpleasant outcomes that we observed in certain communities was that people are often engaged to solving of some minor questions when there are smaller budget, less of business interests. So something about culture, public space, youth policy. So here there are a lot of engagement, but when we're talking about building of infrastructure, housing, development of economics, where when there are a lot of money and different stakeholders, people are not really engaged. And it's also one of the risks, because people understand what questions are more important and what questions are less important. And it is crucial to be honest and open with people and engage them, not only to some minor questions where consensus is easier, but to different questions, including conflict ones where there are possible different positions, different ideas, and where it is important to engage different groups of people to represent different interests. Because when we are engaging people only to the issues where there are no conflicts, then it's not very honest. So we're solving the issues where everything is already clear, basically. It is very important to be honest with ourselves. And within this context, we have to remember that the people will be more engaged, the more important question we are looking into. So if everything is clear, people will be less willing to engage to different processes. But if they're really thinking that the issue is important, they have something to say about it, it's a question everybody cares about, it increases the chance that people will engage. So today we're going to talk about some of these things. I'm very happy that we are having this opportunity. I'm happy you joined. We don't have air raid alert. And nothing will interrupt us, I hope, except for the educational webinars within our project. And by the way, all the workshops were recorded and you can find them on our website, the recordings, I mean. And September, we will also make an announcement that we are looking for partner communities to deepen our cooperation on this project. We are very grateful to the communities, to those communities which already applied. Now we are in the process of detailed study, and I hope that in the nearest time we will be able to give you the feedback on your applications. We are grateful to all of you for being with us today, and we wish you good and productive discussion. And Maria, we are happy to hear you again. The floor is yours. Thank you so much. I'm sorry for this technical problem. All of a sudden, my connection was off. So let us continue our interaction. Thank you very much, Ivan, for your introduction, for your explanations about the project. Before we give floor to our dear speakers, I would encourage you to introduce yourself. For this purpose, please use our chat. Everyone who is willing, you can write your name in the chat, your community or institution you represent, and also you're welcome to share the basic topics you are interested in today. Tell us why you decided to join us today, what questions you are interested in. Because we're also interested to know who joined us today and what are your basic interests. So please just write a couple of words in the chat. And I suggest that we give floor to our first speaker. I see we're having technical problems again, so I will try to act as a backup for Maria. So our first speaker, Ms. Inna Tereshenko, the head of leadership in education, educational center in Odessa, Miss Irina Miss Ina, I'm sorry, will tell us in more details about mediation practices in conflict solving in the communities they are using with colleagues in their practice. Miss Ina, the floor is yours. Thank you so much. I just came from another event and I needed a couple of minutes of break, but the life is fast. So hello, everyone. Thank you very much for your invitation and for your interest in this topic. I am not only the head of the Educational Center Leadership and Education, but I'm also a mediator and dialogue facilitator, and I work as a mediator quite for a while, since 1990s, and I am working as a facilitator of the dialogue since 2014. So all the subjects about the rebuild of the communities, etc. It's true that I look at those questions through the prism of conflicts. It may seem weird to you. Why? Well, I have to say, as an introduction, that in our culture, unfortunately, a conflict is something that people tend to avoid. So usually people avoid conflicts. People who work in the communities, and unfortunately, it happens also between the people who make decisions. They tend to avoid conflicts, and we were talking about this before this war outbreak, that people do not see the conflict as something that can be a conflict, the problem of the middle side. They wait for the real escalation and then they're trying to address it quickly. So I joined this Zoom meeting when Ivan was saying that there are communities where there are no conflicts. And I don't think currently, at least, we're having any communities where there are no conflicts. Why? Because we have several levels or several forms of conflicts. How can you differentiate them? And why these conflicts appear in the first place? Well, it's not only about conflict and psychological condition of people, and those topics are very important in the times of war, but we have to talk about social and communicative tissue of the communities in general. And now we have this huge migration inflows, not regulated, and sometimes there are more IDPs or the same number of IDPs as the local citizens. And people have different, even culture, like different habits. People from different regions, they try to organize their life, their daily life, in a different way. And for small communities, sometimes it's a problem. It brings up tension because their normal life they got used to, it starts changing, and it starts changing in the way that is not clear, that is hard to understand. And we have to know that it's something objective realia, and we have to speak about the organization of this dialogues to help people understand each other, to help why this is happening. For example, I was working as one of the co-authors of Mobile Brigade methodology. Those was the first.
It was a project that began with April of the last year. And for example, we felt this tension in the air in between people who live in small communities, and there are IDPs who were walking their dogs in the daytime. And the small town community couldn't understand that. They actually were tensed about that. And they were thinking about these people who were walking their dogs in the daytime as people who are lazy, who have nothing to do, who have no other chores or work. So there was this tension that our men, they're fighting in war while you are here walking your dogs in the daytime as if you have nothing to do. So you understand these are different habits, different patterns of behavior, and this creates different conflicts. Also, we could say that these conflicts are intercultural and geographical. A lot of people from the eastern part of Ukraine are uh, citizens, so people who are used to live in large cities, in smaller cities, and it goes in conflict with people who live in villages and receive these IDPs. Another thing which we could mention is a so-called background conflict, a conflict that creates tension that was rather hidden or latent before the full-scale war. There were this type of tensions before the full-scale invasion. For example, what do I mean? Like language. Language is a complicated subject in our country, which has decades, like this conflict has decades of history, and it has been a source of different stresses. So we could say, we could establish that language matter creates all types of various conflicts that are not always only language related, because this is in many ways is clashes between different statuses, acceptance, fears on both sides of the conflict. And in order to be able to have such conversations about language, we need to build some understanding about, we need to understand those people who don't want to listen to Russian language, who feel it painful, find it painful. And at the same time, why Russian-speaking Ukrainian citizens, why and what exactly they are undergoing at the moment. For example, we had a little survey in Odessa region, in the region that is traditionally Russian-speaking language region. So this research has been conducted already after 6 months of the full-scale invasion, somewhere in the end of summer or in the beginning of fall. And we saw that a lot of people faced a strong conflict of self-identity. Those people who were always Russian-speaking but living in Ukraine, they didn't know how to treat that part of their own identity that is rooted in Russian language culture. Because on the one side, they do speak Russian language in their daily life, but on the other side, they don't want to identify themselves anymore with the Russian language. And it is a rather painful process for these people, specifically when there is an ongoing conversation that is highlighting these types of tensions. So I'm sorry, I just mentioned two different layers in this subject, but I just wanted to make a point of different types of conflicts that have been visible sometimes invisible before the full-scale invasion. For example, in our region, in the southern region of Ukraine, in Odessa, we had a yearly conversation meeting dedicated to language, beginning with 2014, where all different representatives of the cultural fields got together, and we started this mediation, this cultural conversations. But unfortunately, with the beginning with 2016, 2017, citizens were saying that we are all right already. There is no problem with the language anymore, but we have other types of problems that have to be solved. One was a technical type of problem, and another is rather existential type of problem linked to this language issue. And then beginning with 2016, somehow the situation shifted where we were kind of pushed towards this technical problems, meaning economical problems, financial problems, and they pushed away these identity conflicts that we experienced within our society. But now, due to the full-scale invasion, this existential conflict, identity conflict, became relevant and topical again. Another aspect is topics of different topics that kind of divide society in parts. Normally, these are topics related to war. What do I mean by that? One of such topics or subjects is the following. Who were, who, which people were the reason for this full-scale invasion? On the one hand, this Russian-speaking population somehow was perceived as those who, or at least covered in the media as those who need to be saved, and other type of people in Ukraine who are completely pro-Ukrainian, and it is perceived that this Russian invasion is aimed at those people to pacify them somehow. So this is one of the challenge that we have. We have so many complaints which people have towards each other. We have so many tensions, and unless we speak about all of these things, unless we talk them through, we wouldn't be able to solve something on the fundamental level. So we need to have good understanding. We need to understand that our society is polycultural, multicultural, in order to approach those solutions. Another thing worth mentioning is the need. I'm sorry, there is something happening here. Yeah, so another thing worth mentioning is probably to consider the need of educating people, specifically. Sorry, I'm a little bit confused in my thoughts. I wanted to say that's about IDPs, internally displaced people. So we have different flows of internally displaced people, different amounts of internally displaced people. And remember, in 2016, 2017, there were conversations highlighted that internally displaced people need assistance in their integration in the local communities. So a lot of internally displaced people could be stressed by the idea that they need to get integrated in the new area. I think it is a little bit too early to speak about it. So they need assistance in adapting to new realities rather than integrating into the new communities. Let's take an example. Internally displaced people from Mariupol who came to Odessa to live, to stay. Some people among those internally displaced maybe want to stay in Odessa. They don't have plans to come back to their land or to move somewhere else. While the other part of this people is probably hoping to come back to their home city, to Mariupol, after the victory. So we need to understand their condition. And on one hand, we need to help them to adapt, while on the other hand, we shouldn't be hasty in calling them um, um, Odessa, Mariupol citizens, or people who came from Mariupol but already settled down in Odessa, because these people might think of them as of those who might come back. This is one case. Another type of tensions which I would also like to bring up. In smaller towns, sometimes even in larger towns, we have such types of tensions that are linked to aid as assistance that is being provided to internally displaced people. And this tension raises among local population who also um, who who are questioning why only internally displaced people are getting this support, like economical or financial support or humanitarian aid. I remember that a very similar situation happened in Crimea, where the aid was provided to Crimean Tatars, people that were deported. And local people were also complaining, saying that they're not happy with the situation because their own financial condition is quite poor as well. So I remember that one of the solution was where all people who lived in specific communities, they decided to be together and to show that they belong to the same community. That is why when Crimean Tatars as a deported population received humanitarian or financial aid, it was received by the whole community, so they were redistributing among themselves. Of course, current situation is different, and I see that beginning with October, a new process was initiated. This process was closely linked to the understanding that internally displaced people bring together with them new opportunities, financial, employment opportunities, development, education, restoration opportunities. It is an important and very interesting subject that has to be highlighted as well. Madam Ina, I'm very sorry. I have to remind you about our time limitations. Yes, I'm already close to conclusion. So I would like to ask you to conclude, to sum up your message and maybe give some pieces of advice to representatives of the communities who are present here. And specifically what to do when local communities experience this identity-related conflict. So whom could they contact with? How to learn to build this this dialogue between different sectors of population. I'm sure that those challenges that you mentioned, they are important. They are important to understand. On the one hand, this knowledge helps to create efficient conversation between people within one community, and also it might serve as a good foundation for further learning on how to apply different tools in order to overcome those conflicts. Yes, thank you so much. Well, this is the first of all, speaking about advice, first of all, there should be support, um, basic, profound support that should be provided to those people who are making decisions. Because these tensions are being nurtured, first of all, by internal discourse, first of all, by internal conversations, while there should be support provided to local decision makers, specifically through state authorities, so it should go down by the vertical. And so people should be encouraged to learn more about conflicts, to try to solve the conflicts, to be not afraid of those conflicts. Another piece of advice is that there are professionals, there are experts, there are not so many of them. However, they could be still engaged. For example, there are projects, so-called mobile squads. Caritas project is working on the new project in this regard, where psychologists working together with conflict mediators, and they assist local governments, local authorities, local communities, and they really serve as a very strong support for the local communities in order to establish and define conflicts that exist at the moment. Another thing to mention is that the identity conflict is a rather complex conflict which our country wasn't prepared to. So not everyone is ready to work with them. There are projects, however, that are working in this direction, and it would be great if a lead project would collect information about these experts who would be helping in this field. For example, Svetlana Petrova, an expert from Kharkiv, she has a full network of partnership projects that help communities to establish dialects and conversations. I know that in Kremenchuk, in other cities, there are such network projects. Slowly, this network is growing. Caritas are also working in this direction. It is important to understand that this type of efforts, they have to be backed up by expert knowledge. And if someone doesn't possess enough of knowledge and expertise, then it might lead to disappointment and frustration. However, at the same time, there are enough of experts ready to work in this field. For example, I am inviting to contact me. I have many colleagues that are ready and qualified to work with the communities, and we are now at the stage of preparing specific projects in order to protect local communities. And these mobile squads or mobile brigades, they are also bringing more experts into their team in order to work more in this direction. So whenever there is a request that here we are, we want to work with the conflict related issues, then we are ready to respond to this request, because these are types of conflicts that could not be solved quickly. This type of conflicts require long-term process-oriented approaches, and only when people are ready to do that, there is possible something to do with it. Thank you. Thank you so much. And I would like to ask our members, our participants here, do you have any questions? You have two options. One is to write your question into the chat box. It will be translated. And another another way is to unmute yourself, raise your hand, and ask your question. And Madam Ina, I would like to ask you to share your contacts in the chat box so that our participants could contact you. I see there are no questions. Okay, there are no questions. Maybe you are going to have your questions in the process of our event. Then please contact Madam Ina directly, and she's going to share her contacts at the moment.
Mostly this happened in the western part of Ukraine, but well, you can go to the website and check what kind of dialogue initiatives took place in the community. And let us move forward. Let's go to a very sensitive and relevant topic. This is a topic connected with the optimization of school network and education in the communities. I would like to give the floor to Konstantin Shakalo, Center of Common Action, Chief Analyst. Hello, everybody. Can you hear the presentation on the screen? Yes, we can. The only thing, like, it's not slideshow. It's reduced version. Okay, let me check it. Now I think you can see this full screen presentation. Yeah, my name is Konstantin Shokalo. I'm the head of regional analytics department. I'm very grateful to of the Center of Common Actions. I'm very grateful to SEDIS for this invitation, and in such a way we have an opportunity to share our experience of engagement the citizens to the decision making. So later, if you have any comments or questions, please get in touch with me. We will share all the materials we have, and we would be able to provide some additional consultations regarding those issues we're going to discuss within this workshop. So first of all, I would like to tell you who we are and why we can speak about citizens engagement. We are analytical and educational organization, and we do analysis of local and state policy since 2009, and we use the tools of citizen engagement at all the levels in order to provide the most inclusive and effective policies. In 2017, 2019, we were doing the regional consultations at the local and national level as to the healthcare and educational reform. Then we had a network of regional coordinators who were doing the consultations at the regional and local level in order to be able to address the problems of the citizens of the communities in a more inclusive way and engage local authorities. After that, after having collected all the experience that we gained during all this time, we went to the new level of cooperation with the territorial communities. We changed our methodology a little bit, and now we are trying to combine the profound deep analytics and engagement of the citizens to the decision making. This approach allows us, on one hand, to check the basic statistic data and to look for the more effective way to build the local policy or decision making. On the other hand, to be inclusive for maximum in engagement of the people in this policy making. At the moment, we have 8 partner communities, and we cooperate with them in different topics, 4 main topics: education, health care, and waste management, and culture. Education is one of our main topics, and this is what I would like to discuss today. So if you're gonna have any questions, I would be very happy to answer them during Q&A session. So how do we work with communities? First of all, you have to understand that any policy, whether of local level or national level, it's about people and for the people. It cannot be high quality policy if people are not involved, if community members are not involved. So we create policies for our people. Without their engagement, you will never be able to create something that community will benefit from. We have a public policy cycle, and it's our principle of work. Local authorities work within this cycle generally, but not to the full scope. Today, I'm talking about local policies, and local authorities are more focused on decision making. Those can be some complexes of decisions or some single decisions or solutions. Our main aim is to develop the capacity of local authorities to take most effective and most inclusive, to accept most, adopt most inclusive and effective policies or decisions. We start from the moment of defining the problem, because it is halfway to success, how you determine the problem. Very often communities just don't understand the problem and then they're trying to solve their own problem. And up till the moment when the problem is solved and we need to evaluate how good the solution was. So we use different practices, including citizen engagement tools, and I will tell more about them. In terms of a topic of education, there are three main formats that we are using within the context of engagement of citizens in decision making. Interview with community stakeholders, questioning of target groups or citizens, and public consultations in different formats. At the moment, according to the legislation, communities are obliged to have public hearings, public discussions, and this is kind of, they consider it's the only form of engagement, but they do not see other opportunities. We recommend to use the most practical formats at different stages. At the moment, we face the situation when communities are using engagement in the very end, when the decision is already made, and then they start having public consultations. Sometimes they manage to reach some consensuses, sometimes they are not, and they are still taking the decision regardless of the opinion of people. And of course, such decisions are not inclusive. So engagement should happen from the very beginning, from the moment of determining the problem. So it should happen from the very beginning. It should continue at each stage. And at different stages, there are different formats that are effective. For example, stakeholder interview is more effective at the stage of defining the problem. Then we use questionnaires. Those can be online or offline. And, online questionnaires became very relevant because of the war and COVID, and it actually requires less resources. So those are questionnaires or polls that can be done in different stages. You make several cycles in order to understand what is the problem, what kind of solutions the citizens want or what they would prefer. And it allows you to be more inclusive in defining the policies that will help to solve the problem. And in the very end, of course, there should be public consultation in one of the formats. At the moment, the most widespread and obligatory format is the public discussion. You shouldn't forget about communication, and it is very important to remember about it. Of course, communication should happen at each stage. What we saw from our own experience is that very often people just don't understand what should they be engaged in. Like sometimes there are decisions made already, for especially in education, because, for example, the representatives of local authorities come to town or village to make a public discussion, and people don't understand why are we here, and they start talking about healthcare, about land, about any other questions that they care about. So there should be a good communication, and this communication should happen before the engagement. So people should understand that they will be engaged in solving specific problem, and people have to decide whether they want to solve the problem generally, because sometimes it's a problem for the authorities, but for the citizens, it's not a priority. This problem is not a priority. So they have to understand what they're going to be engaged in, what kind of information they receive. It's very important to inform people in the right way from the very beginning. And the local authority has certain statistics, and it's important to explain people what's going on, because people have to understand the context of the problem. It is very important to remember that communication helps you to evoke interest, to understand how much people are aware, to raise awareness. And further on, it helps to create the ground to have more fruitful public hearing or other types of public consultations, where you can come to certain variants of solutions or decisions. Now I would like to speak more about education, what Maria has mentioned about our experience. One of the latest projects we were working on, I will give you the example of Sakalska community. It's a community in Lviv region. We help them and we cooperate them since summer 2022. So it happened after the full-scale invasion, and we help these communities to reorganize the network of schools, secondary schools, and we were working with this community and we were trying to engage the citizens. So let me share the very fresh insights on what is working, what is not working when we are talking about engagement in the topic of education. First of all, you have to understand that education has a very determined target groups, and you have to engage them in the first instance. So first of all, those are pupil, teachers, and parents. And we were doing online questionnaire with these groups of people. Why online? I will explain a bit later. So there are no problems to determine the target group. We understand who the policies are aimed at. You can clearly see these groups. They can be a bit different, or there can be subgroups within those groups, but it's quite easy to determine them, which means you can find the most practical engagement format. In this case, online questionnaire was the best to understand the problem, to understand what kind of solution can be proposed. And so we had this questionnaire in 3 target groups, and according to the data, you can see that we got quite a broader selection that we planned. So people wants to be engaged. They want their opinion to be heard, because very often representatives of local authorities say, well, people are not interested, they don't want to be engaged. It's not true, especially in education. Well, on one hand, education is quite is a topic where there are a lot of potential conflicts, because it's about the future of the children. Parents are very engaged, but very often they don't understand what reorganization means, what's going to happen, and very often they think something bad will happen. It's a change, and people perceive changes negatively until they understand what the change is about. And also, there is a topic with a lot of potential conflicts. At the same time, it is the most participative topic, so people want to be engaged. And there's a myth that people don't care. People in the community don't care. As you see, we planned to make a questionnaire within 2 weeks, and in 2 weeks, we have covered like a bigger number of people than we expected. So people were really willing to participate. Same about the other communities, not necessarily about education, but participation in engagement in education is one of the highest. If it is a small community, village community, you can try to make a questionnaire in this community to check what happens with the target groups, and it will open your eyes. It will tell you everything. Here, I would highly recommend online questionnaire. Why? Because you are able to use it at different stages. And you can use it several times. It's not like you do the measurement once. You can do it at different stages. You can work on your problem. You can check how are you going to solve it at the level of new local policy. And people say a lot about questionnaires, that it's a very effective tool. So if you have any questions, you need templates, whatever, any advices on how to do it, you have any questions on how to implement it, please do not hesitate to contact us, and I will be willing to share the information and help with that. I do recommend you to use Google Forms for online questioning. They're very convenient, and it is very convenient to process the data with the help of Google Forms afterwards. It's a very practical approach. On the other hand, you don't require a lot of resources to make a questionnaire. It will not take a lot of money and a lot of time, but you will be able to engage the maximum number of target groups in education, for example, to understand their position. And then you will have a certain ground to propose your solutions, to choose the most effective and inclusive ones, to consult with people regarding this variant, and to implement it further. Also, there is an important question like, what should you further do with those questionnaires? Very often they're being held, and you see a huge table, for example, it was much bigger. Sometimes it's hundreds of thousands of lines, and you have lots of answers. And what should you do with that? You will process that, you will see the indicators, but then you have to convert it into the decision, into an inclusive decision. And the decision that can be implemented in order for the benefit of the community. You have to understand that if most of the people tell you something, it doesn't mean you have to do this, what the majority wants. You don't need to make a questionnaire to understand what majority wants. With the help of the questionnaire, you engage the maximum number of groups, and you see the position of these groups for each question. And when you were trying to design the new policies, you will see that certain group needs this, and you will understand how you can take their need into account inclusively and how to cover it in your policy. So you check the tendency, and tendency is what majority wants, and then you check what other group want, and you take this into account while designing your policy. Second, you have to check the trends or tendencies. You check the data you have gathered, and you try to understand where people are of the same opinion at most, and where the opinions are differ. And those are questions for the public hearings, so public consultations. So you have to understand what kind of questions have to be discussed. Those shouldn't be the ready-made decisions or ready-made projects. I will explain you later what it can result in. You have to bring up some issues where people either agree or disagree. You have to look for the consensus and cover it by the new. Also, you have to
Another
be
thing is to be
transparent
transparent in the way you are
by coming up
analyzing the
with the
results and taking these results into account in the decision-making process, in the policy development process. This transparency would help them to engage in
to be engaged not only in this subject but on the other subjects, and you will have
will help them to this transparency will help them to engage in all fields,
it will be easier for
all
you
policies.
to implement any other
so you'll be able to realize to implement it efficiently. And the very last thing is to have a comprehensive approach, which is important. Questioning and survey is not enough on its own, because it has to be done in the package of other measures like consultations, data analysis, because engagement of citizens without the goal will not help you to create an efficient policy. You have to have a comprehensive approach, like analyzing this data. So these are steps that are important when someone wants to develop efficient policy. Another thing is the balance between engaging citizens into the decision-making process and data analysis. This moment is crucial. Quite often, citizenship engagement is set as a goal on its own without understanding what to do with it. And after such a questionnaires and surveys, the results or outcomes are not always included later into decision making. That is why it is crucial to analyze in unbiased way the data that has been received from the survey. This is the first step. Analyzing data, existing data, and bringing together to it surveys outcomes. And having this data at hand, you'll be able to understand how to solve existing problem. I would like to share with you a case with one of the local communities from Rivna. They collaborated with us. So there were a lot of complaints on behalf of local citizens against their town administration, specifically about reconstruction of schools and other types of educational facilities. So there was a reorganization of educational facilities and people submitted their complaints to the court, and citizens lost their cases because we helped the city-state administration to build their defense in terms of data that has been collected. So before renovating these educational facilities, we were able to show that this city council or this town council administration, they collected data before organizing this infrastructural changes. So they were able to win the trial, but at the same time, if they would engage citizens correctly, then the situation wouldn't have happened, because initially they didn't take into account the needs of the citizens and students. That is why I would like to highlight the point of maintaining the balance between evidence-based decisions and engagement of the citizens. Thank you very much, Konstantin, and we would like to ask you to share your contacts in the chat box so that participants could find you online and learn more about your activities. I would like to invite everyone to ask their questions either by raising their hand and unmuting their microphones, or by posting their question into the chat. I see your comments in the chat saying that Saksaganska territorial community is beginning development of its area and requires assistance and support. So that is why I would like to invite you to raise your questions once again. And while we're waiting for your questions, I would like to ask the following. First of all, thank you very much for sharing your experience. And then Could you share with us what are the mechanisms? What are the mechanisms that and tools you are using in order to regulate existing conflicts? Because when there is a court appellation, probably there were some very strong conflicts. Maybe there were some promises that were not kept or something else. So how were you able to manage that conflict with those actors and stakeholders that were against the decision that was made? Because the trial proceedings is another step. It means that the community is already integrated and is ready to act as a single group. Yes. Once again, I would like to say that before doing anything, before even engaging citizens, you have to start with a communication campaign that begins Oh, that begins and ends at the moment when you are implementing a new local policy. And if you use this approach, then such conflicts diminish substantially. In that specific case, the local authorities, oh, they did this job without us in the beginning. So we were not engaged throughout all of the stages. So they engaged the citizens without us. And that is why there were such problems, because their communication didn't happen from the beginning. Because if you would have shown the real problem to people that is evidence-based, because you need to remember, you always have to have an open, frank, um, an open and frank communication without manipulating them. Once you do that, they see why you are doing that. For example, when you are saying that we cannot maintain the school in this town. We could not maintain the high quality of education in this school. We can't do this, and your children suffer from that. So you share your statistics, you share your arguments, and you work together in order to find an inclusive solution. If you would have this approach from the beginning, then the conflict would not grow so much. If you entered into such a stage where a conflict is already strong, then once again, you need to start communication as much as possible, because this conflict is able to grow even further. Because in that specific community, they wanted to reorganize many other schools and educational facilities. So in order to keep this conflict at least small and try to solve it at the current stage, you need to start communication as soon as possible. And of course, try to prove that your steps are rational, because you have evidence to do that. You are backed up by data. And because these local authorities had data and evidence that were used as the foundation for making decisions, they showed all of that. They showed that they engaged the citizens to their best at that moment. The court supported this local administration because what they were doing was lawful, and they didn't violate any rights, including rights of children, because what they were doing, they were even increasing or enlarging the rights of these children in terms of access to education. Yes, thank you so much. I see comments in our chat box where people are saying that it is important to begin with a mission, vision, strategic vision for the community development in order to inspire citizens to take this road, to walk through this path together. And I think it is important what you mentioned, meaning that engagement is not only about having hearings and consultations, but implementing communication campaigns, implementing awareness raising campaigns in order to make all representatives and actors to understand what is going to be, how is it going to be, and what are the possible benefits for them. Yes, I could just say some words about the strategy, a few words that I agree for the local authorities of these communities having a strategy for development is essential because it comprises a long-term plan for development, and education is always a component of such a strategy. So you need to think about it in advance. However, at the moment, the current situation is such that our legislation set strong deadlines, strict deadlines, and new education cycle should begin with the 1st of September 2024, and we're lacking time for developing efficient roadmaps and draft projects. So those who haven't started their projects yet, those who haven't started reorganization of their educational facilities should start doing it quickly, because you need to start this engagement stage as soon as possible, because otherwise you might end up in this situation where you will be having a ready-made decision and ready-made project at hand, which has not been consulted about with the local citizens, and you might have the same conflicts which I just pictured. Yes, thank you so much. So we have to move on in order to give a possibility to our next speakers to share their experience. And if some of you is going to get questions, please do raise them in the chat. And Konstantin, please be aware of those questions in the chat and do reply to them there, please. Thank you very much for your speech. And next, we are going to speak about environmental challenges. We understand that our communities have faced ecocide, and environmental challenges are among top priorities and will remain among them for a long time. I would like to invite Olga Leshchuk, the organizer of Eco Club project. Please share with us what are your methods of work and how you are engaging people into environmental projects. The floor is yours. Good day, everyone. First of all, I would like to thank to Mr. Konstantin, our previous speaker, for his substantial presentation, because it would help me to move on. I'm not going to speak about the same aspects, but I would rather focus myself on the benefits that a local community might obtain if they develop good documents. There are many aspects that are linked with environmental challenges and climate changes within communities themselves. I hope you can see my presentation. Well, frankly speaking, the conversations about adapting to climate change are full of conflict just by themselves. A lot of people think that environmental issues are not are not in such a top priority that we have completely other things to do now. At the same time, cities developing their strategies on post-war rebuilding and recovery, and towns are developing their strategies. So having such a plan enables you to stick to the same plan in 7 or 8 years. And I'm going to show to you the next slide where you can see the mean annual temperature. For example, in Rivne region where the annual temperature at least increased 1.5 degrees. This is the mean temperature. Okay, let's try to do once again. Do you see it now? Okay, let's try to do it once again. And now? Yes, now we can see. All right, so this is the picture which I was mentioning. This is the temperature change in Ukraine, and this graph is the data collected from 1960 in Rivne region, and this is where you see the error is middle of 90s, and we see that the temperature rose 1 and 1.5 degrees. So just as people don't like very high temperatures, the nature doesn't like high temperatures as well. And different natural events like disasters might happen and again. So for example, this is Kostopil of last summer. This is the town Hostopil. And this was the first ever tornado which has been registered there. So it is important for communities to develop an assessment of environmental risks, which helps to assess all different types of sectors, from building and construction to transport sector, in order to assess the environmental risks, to understand how sensitive categories of populations could suffer from that, how different sectors could suffer from rise of temperature or in general environmental change, and then to think of different tools, be it very cheap or very expensive tools to mitigate those risks, in order to understand what to do. So communities should develop such a document, like local authorities should develop such documents together with local citizens. I developed such documents for Rivne, for Korostin, and now we are finalizing this document for Zhytomyr. Our steps were the following. We worked with a municipality, with local authorities, with local NGOs, with municipal municipal services, and the local citizens. So your group could be rather large, but if you didn't explain to people what you are expecting from them, what we are doing and what we are working on, we are not going to get any successful outcome. That is why we brought all of those people together. We were speaking about this in a little bit greater details than I was sharing with you at the moment, and then we spread such a questionnaire, which you see on your screens at the moment, where they had to share how they interact and collaborate within their structures, in between other structures, what relevant adaptation measures could they consider good ones. Of course, outcomes of such questioning a survey was very different. So you can see examples of their replies here. but majority of their replies were such which helped us to formulate a list of adaptation measures that people already understand how to do in the strategic plan that has been developed.
Later on, you will receive my presentation. You will be able to check it. Here we can see the green areas. The more greenery, the better it is. Of course, to engage scientists or academia, we need money. Anyone needs money. Of course, at any community, there is some kind of university, college, or other type of educational facility. And you can try to contact them. And students who are writing their theses, doing their research projects, they can be engaged. And students are actually rather motivated because they are always more interested to do some real job that your community will benefit from. You can try to use Google and check, maybe there are some local activists who has been already working on this topic that you're interested in. For example, in Rivne, we found a public initiative called the Garden of History, and we used their analysis of the temperature at the street surfaces, the streets that have trees or greenery, and the streets that doesn't. And it was a very important source of data. And one of the most important source of the data of what should be included to this kind of documents, what will be effective. This comes from the community itself, well, from the citizens of the community itself. And I totally agree with Konstantin that people are interested to take part in a lot of activities. They want influence their community. But at the same time, the questionnaires that we are drafting also can be used for awareness raising. And please be ready that as a result, you can get some very unexpected results when people will be asking your questions. For example, for me and for Rivne municipality, it was very interesting to know that for the majority of people, the aesthetical side of the bus stop or public transport stop is more important than the possibility to sit on a bench or whatever while you're waiting for the transport. And in every questionnaire, there were something interesting when we were surprised when we saw the result. Also, you can check what the community is ready for and what the community is expecting from you. For example, in Koristen, we were asking what people are expecting from authorities in terms of adaptation to the extreme heat. And they were expecting that there will be clean water in the river to be able to be bathed, to refresh. And people were more willing to have clean water rather than thermal insulation of the buildings. And it doesn't mean you have to react immediately and cancel thermal insulation and start cleaning the river, but you would know what people are ready for, what they are willing for, and you will have an ability to plan the public event in the right way. You can ask people what they are ready to do themselves to solve certain problem, for example, climate change. And you can be based on that, what the community will implement and what they will be open to or maybe you need to prepare people to certain things. On the contrary, lately, more and more people are interested in some kind of interactive things. This is our pilot project in Rivne. We named it a puddle. So I know that rain sewage, when there are heavy rains, rain sewage is not able to intake all this water, and there are little floods on the roads, on the crossroads, on the streets. So we made an interactive map. A person is able to take a picture of this flood, and we made a map of the most flooded areas in Rivne city, and then we will submit this map to the city council for them to include these areas to their repair plans, repair and restoration plans. I would like to finish here. The last important thing I would like to say about engagement. A lot of communities now have new people who came, who joined these communities. And of course, you don't have to push on these people because they need time to settle down, to organize their life at the new place. But almost 1 year has passed, and a lot of people already have resources to work and to join actively the life of the community they found themselves. And among our environmental organizations, we observed very good examples of interaction at this level. Now, Kalush town is developing a strategy of community, and the organization that made the same strategy for Bakhmut is now taking part in this strategy development, and this will make this strategy for Kalush even stronger, I believe. To summarize, I would like to say, please do not be afraid to communicate with all the participants, with all the members of the community. Our ECA club has a lot of other activities, and we would be happy to consult you on climate change adaptations, on evaluation of vulnerability. Also, we have experience of some litigations, unfortunately, but also experience of influence on the environment. A huge enterprise is planning their development near our city, and it's close to a big area where people live, residential area, and of course there is a conflict with the local community, and we can consult you and tell you how we were communicating with local community, with representatives of this enterprise, with local authorities, in order to mitigate this conflict or to solve this conflict. Now, also in cooperation with other organizations, we provide grants to the communities to implement projects in green energy projects, and we help to develop feasibility studies, preliminary feasibility studies for climate neutral projects. There are always some issues with fundings in the communities and there's always lack of funding to develop these documents, and there are lots of international organizations, foreign organizations who are ready to invest into the rebuild of Ukraine, and they have some ready feasibility studies and they can help with them. They can help communities with them. I will also put this information in the chat. And please, I encourage you to contact us. We will be happy to help and explain everything. Thank you so much for your presentation, for your experience. And I encourage all of you, dear participants, to cooperate with Eco Club. Dear participants, do you have any questions? I don't see hands raised. Okay. Since we have no questions, let me ask a question. Would you share your experience on the following topic? Today in Ukraine, unfortunately, there are a lot of communities which faced challenges, environmental challenges, ecocide, as you mentioned. We have lots of pollution of the territories, of the fields, contamination by artillery shelling, and additionally cutting of the trees. So a lot of environmental challenges. Do you have any projects or examples you could share to help the communities which are facing this environmental challenges already? Or maybe there are some projects that are being developed and it is possible to enter into cooperation with you on this project. Well, we don't have projects like this that are being physically implemented already, but you can contact us, you can write me directly, and I will refer you to the organizations who work on this, and there are such organizations, and there is quite a number of them. What we do currently, we are more focused on the renewable energy sources project, for example, for autonomous power supply for hospitals and water supply plants. We installed solar panel power station at one of the hospitals, and it allows them to be autonomous for a certain period of time. As to the damage caused, when community is planning something, and they're already planning because we cooperate a lot with communities who plan to do the rebuild. Well, recently the town of Lubotin in Kharkiv region presented their rebuild program. It is very important to take into account all those factors I mentioned in the very beginning, that the climate will change. It will influence the community, and when you develop your plans, you have to take it into account. Otherwise, in some 7-10 years, you need to think how you will need to rebuild everything, but this time because of the climate change. Thank you so much. And I think this example that you gave us regarding the citizens that said that they would prefer clean river to the house insulation. I think it's quite interesting about the needs of our community members, like some access to some common resources is very important. And indeed, this is something we have to pay attention to, because the problems connected with climate change and global warming, they will not disappear, unfortunately. Thank you so much. So if you have any questions, please write them down in the chat, and I would like Olga answer them if she sees them in the chat. And I'm happy to give the floor to our last speaker. We started our conversation by giving the examples of cooperation in the community, conflict solving and dialogue practices with the engagement of mediators. And we spoke about intercultural interaction And I would like to give a floor to Mikola Bordotsky to talk on the intercultural cooperation within the community. And I would ask you to share your experience of engaging Roma community to decision-making in municipalities. And please share the experience of your public organization. Mikola, the floor is yours. Mikola, your microphone is off. Can you hear me now? Yes, great. Thank you so much, Maria. Thank you very much, dear organizers, for inviting me. Dear participants, I'm very happy to see you, and I'm very grateful for your interest in this topic. You know, when we talk about Roma community, every time I emphasize that Roma people are citizens of Ukraine as people of other ethnicities. But we understand that there are certain difficulties. And during the last 2-3 years, we have been working on the model of organization for Roma community to ensure the cooperation with local self-governing bodies. And this was a model that was successfully implemented in Kharkiv region, in Merefa town, and Vovchansk town. Unfortunately, because of the full-scale invasion, this practice at the moment is suspended, but I believe that we will continue to develop this model, and I would like to present it right now. First of all, I would like to say that we implemented this model within the Roma Strategy 2020. It was a platform for our cooperation with self-governing bodies and local authorities. Can I share my screen? Yes, sure. Please do. Okay. Yeah, we can see your screen. Yes, we can see your presentation. Great. First of all, I would like to say that Roma community problems are connected with the fact that there are 12 ethnical groups of Roma people, and they're different in their culture, in their language, and at the level of integration into Ukrainian society. And that's why each community, each ethnical group requires separate scope of work, and that's what we were doing. But we had some common methodology and principles that we applied in our practice. First of all, I would like to speak on in Ukraine.
First of all, I would like to say about the problems that they face. One of the important factors is that the Roma community are quite isolated. There are many reasons for that. Among major reasons, there are different reasons that make them isolated. So there is a low level of socialization. There is quite often not enough of documents, ID, passport, and if there are documents, documental problems, then there are a lot of other problems in different spheres of life. A low level of education, And just as an outcome of all of those previous factors is low employment. And we, as a human rights organization in the field of protecting human rights, we were working in order to support Roma communities in all of those factors. What was our goal? Our goal was to improve the living standards in Roman communities through the free access to services and to possibilities to realize their rights. We understood that there are different factors that don't allow Roma communities to have direct access and the tools to protect their rights. First of all, we wanted to engage Roma people into the process of integration into local society and political life. Our principle was to do nothing for Roma people without Roma people. For quite many years, communities wanted to do something for Roma communities, but Roma people were quite passive and they were not engaged. That is why we wanted, first of all, to engage them into this process to make them take active role. The second objective was to raise the awareness about their rights and freedoms and ways to realize them. Representatives of Roma communities got used to solving their life problems on their own, through their own solutions and means. We all know that there are ways to solve problems and there are legal ways, but you need to be aware of them. And the third objective was to help them to get free access to state services. These objectives were in the center of our model. The model itself had a few stages. The first stage was forming initiative group that is based on the Roma community. So we worked with the Roma representatives in order to form an initiative group that would represent and present interests of their Roma community in this or that amalgamated community. It was a lengthy process. It took us 1 year to form such initiative groups. The second stage within our model was to start a training program for civil servants. For civil servants, representatives of the authorities, and also representatives of local self-organized authorities, in order to help people to understand mentality of Roma people, ways of effective communication with Roma people. So we made them to understand that these people make part of their society, of their community. So you need to understand them. You need to understand their linguistic and cultural differences. In order to set effective communication, you need to understand their values, their priorities, their bans. And based on that, we developed an efficient communication model with Roma community. The third stage of the model included establishment of the working group that included representatives of the local authorities, of the self-governance authorities, and Roma communities. Then we conducted monitoring a process in order to analyze and define existing problems and needs in Roma communities. We wanted to analyze these problems and think of possible solutions and how to satisfy those needs. There were different stakeholders, representatives of civil organizations, of business community, of local self-governance authorities, and the community itself. These actors were brought together, and by working together, they were able to find solutions to different needs. Next stage included development of the action plan for this working group, and we developed this working plan in Kharkiv region in several amalgamated communities. The process of the initiative group formation started with initiating and presenting the project in the Roma community. People had to understand what this project was about and what possible benefits they could obtain, what would be possible future prospects. So we presented this project in the communities. We had a focus group where we presented our model of interaction between different parts of the community with the Roma community. Roma community is family-based community, which is clan-based. So we were looking and searching for such people who were educated. Normally, these were younger people, and together with representatives of these families, we conducted a meeting. In one town. There were 15 representatives of Roma community. In the other town, we had 12 representatives of the Roma community, and they formed the initiative group. Throughout the year, together with these two initiative groups, we conducted a number of training sessions where we raised such questions as what the state is, what are human rights and freedoms, how to communicate, how to ensure your rights are protected and fulfilled. So we trained them and we learned with them together. And then, on the basis of this initiative group, we were able to build a communication strategy for the Roman community so that they could communicate efficiently with the local community, self-governance authority, and local authorities in general. Just as I mentioned before, we conducted a training program, like training workshops in one of the towns in Kharkiv region, in town Merefa, and you can see pictures from that event. So in this slide, you see cooperation with local administration, with city councils, city administrations. So we presented our project to those city councils. We developed training courses to them, and we signed an agreement on further collaboration. After that, we established a working group that was formed on the basis of representatives of the Roma communities who decided to work in the initiative group, and the representatives of the society, including social workers, teachers, doctors, civil servants, etc. In order to find solution to some questions, there is a need of collaboration in between representatives of different fields like healthcare, education, etc. That is why we conducted such a meeting of a working group where we planned the program and thought how to implement this program best at the level of the community. The working group did the following. The first stage was to analyze the current situation in the field. We were analyzing specific problems that local Roma communities were facing, and in different towns, these problems were different. For example, in Merefa town, there were problems more linked to education for children, while in Vovchansk town, the problem which they wanted to solve was more linked to social challenges, like receiving IDs, passports for Roma community people. So when we were able to analyze those problems, we built a problem tree that helped us to understand the cause and consequences. And we tried to solve those underlying causes together with representatives of corresponding, of respected agencies or organizations like health workers, social workers, etc. Then we worked on implementing this plan. We worked on highlighting and presenting the outcomes of this work. And then we analyzed that work which has been done. And then we thought which problems were not solved in full and what should we do in order to find effective solutions. So this is our work in the field. We conducted monitoring in the Roma communities, and there were questionnaires and surveys. We used focus groups. And then we had the process of engaging Roma communities in the social events. So you see that Roma communities, representatives, and in general Roma people, they joined local celebrations, and for many people it was the first time. And I was so happy to see when people are overcoming different types of barriers, like cultural barriers, and Roma people start understanding that they are Ukrainians with Roma roots. Thank you very much, Mykola, for your presentation, and I would like to ask you to share your contacts once again in the chat. Maybe representatives of communities and NGOs would like to work with you in the future so that you had the opportunity to exchange your knowledge and contacts. So I'm giving question time. So if you have questions to our speaker, please raise them. And while waiting for questions, I would like to highlight the following. In our presentations that we've heard today, we have heard a lot that engagement and cooperation with local people should begin with understanding and learning of cultural differences. And thank you very much for this phrase, which you said, nothing for you without you, nothing for Roma community without Roma community. And this, I think, is the basic recommendation on how we should collaborate. We should start with such initiative working groups, but I just paid attention that in order to have a possibility of interaction between different parts of communities, there is always an educational component, like training component. And I'm interested to ask you whether you are engaged in joint education and cultural exchange. And if you do have such projects, could you share with us, and maybe could you give us recommendations how to start such projects in the communities, so that we are not only teaching someone, but also we are learning from someone, building this bilateral process of learning and teaching. so that we are integrating from both sides. Not only we want to integrate Roma people into our society, but we integrate ourselves into their society. Yes, thank you so much for your question. We have such projects. So we had such a project recently, which was conducted under a larger project of drafting Roma strategy in the social center of Kharkiv region. We conducted such a training program on how to interact with the Roma families and communities, and there were very positive feedback. Participants were saying that our attitude has changed towards Roma community as a whole, because I understand that our society is full of biases, not only towards Roma communities, but in general towards different categories of population. People live with these biases regardless of their education, of their background. So we conducted such training courses for representatives of human rights organizations, for law enforcement, for patrolling police, for social workers, for educators. Because once a person understands the history, the culture, the backgrounds, the factors that formulated the worldview and values of certain group of people, and why they behave in such way, once they are informed, the attitude changes as well, because this interpersonal factor is playing its role. We are biased. After such training courses, so we saw that collaboration and our partnership has improved immensely. We have materials, we have everything. I'm happy to share with you all of those materials. Thank you very much, and we see many thanks in the chat box to you for your systematic approach, for sharing your experience. And I also would like to highlight that being systematic is really helpful in order to get effective results. I have another question which I would like to ask to clarify the following. I think it would be rather relevant in the context of full-scale invasion, the number of challenges that Roma community people are facing at the moment in the front line and in the back line. And I know that you work very actively with internally displaced Roma women. So what are the major challenges that they face now, and what would be good to know for civil servants and representatives of different organizations that are present today here? Thank you very much for your question. And the first challenge, maybe it is not unique to Roma people, but it is accommodation. A lot of Roma families are abroad, but a lot of them remained here in Ukraine. In the beginning, we were able to organize shelters in Uzhhorod, and they were school-based. But beginning with the 1st of September, these schools, they had to be freed. So many Roma families really struggle in finding accommodation due to various reasons. Normally, they have many children in their families. Not all shelters are capable of accommodating them because many shelters are simply overloaded. We work also with Roma churches, churches that provide premises for accommodating Roma families. So one of the challenges that we are being faced regularly is this accommodation thing. Another thing is basic um, basic humanitarian products like food and water. There are organizations that are helping us in this regard. Another problem which we have is documentation, registration. A lot of people don't have enough of the full package of documents. Not everyone has their IDs. And of course, it is a problem. It's quite a problem for us.
Unfortunately, also some people have a very low level of education. Some people are not able to read or write, and we need those mediators who will take these people by the hand and they will walk them through all the necessary steps. And another question is the adaptation, communication with the local community, and public sector here can play a big role. Thank you. Thank you very much for your reply. We, as always, encourage our participants to cooperate. Please reach out for Mykola's contacts and all other speakers. Unfortunately, our time is up, and I have to finish this event. In order to summarize, let me just tell that we were talking about different projects connected with engagement in communities, in solving and decision making in some vulnerable questions where you need more systematic approach and to be more sensitive. And today's event is the last event in the number of events dedicated to engagement and communities. Please check our previous events. We discussed all important questions on engagement, I think. Also, please follow SEDA's think tank events. Please follow our pages and check our website. I'm very grateful to all the participants who joined today's event. Despite the air raid alert just before the event, you still managed to join. I'm very grateful to speakers for sharing your experience and for all your efforts you are doing for our communities and for the future of Ukraine. Also, I would like to thank our armed forces, our volunteers, everyone who is protecting us to give us opportunity to have this event today to discuss topics as engagement and reconstruction. Thank you very much for your participation. And I hope we're gonna have more opportunities to discuss engagement in other formats and other events. Ivan, would you like to close our events? It's as this is a final meeting. Yes, I'm very grateful to all our participants. I hope this number of events was useful for